The station floated in silence, a monolith of steel and light orbiting a dying star that bled orange and red across the void. From the outside, it looked like any other hive of civilization, but inside, thousands of aliens moved as one, bodies gliding with a synchronized precision that made the place feel more like a living organism than a collection of individuals. Thoughts flashed invisibly, a shimmering network of emotion and logic flowing across the crowd. Lyra lingered at the edge, arms folded tightly against her chest, her gaze sweeping the endless corridor. She had tried for years to plug herself into the network, to feel its pulse, but the connection always rejected her. Every flicker of telepathy that washed over the station reminded her that she was alone, invisible, a single note lost in a symphony. She could see others exchanging thoughts in rapid, luminous bursts, their faces serene in the constant mental chatter. Yet, whenever she tried, her own attempts fizzled like a candle in a storm. A sudden vibration through the station's hull made her flinch. The docking bay doors hissed open, and she saw them, a human delegation stepping out onto the platform. They moved differently, loud, chaotic, unrestrained. Where the aliens floated, the humans stomped. Where the aliens shimmered in synchronized thought, the humans gestured with their hands, spoke in harsh syllables that jarred the senses. It was a disruption, an intrusion, and for some reason, it made Lyra's chest tighten with curiosity. Among them, a man stepped forward. He didn't glide, didn't shimmer with the usual alien grace, but he moved with careful observation, scanning the station like he could see its secrets hidden in plain sight. He paused, eyes landing on her, not the network, not the hive mind, not the others, but on her. A ripple of unease passed through Lyra's chest. No one had ever looked at her that way. She looked away instinctively, but when she dared another glance, his gaze was steady, patient, unintrusive. Lyra felt a spark, a strange fluttering she had no name for. Could it be curiosity? Interest? Recognition? It was almost painful, this sudden awareness that she was being acknowledged, not as an anomaly or a failure, but as someone real, someone worth noticing. Her heart beat faster, a human rhythm she had never experienced, and it made her want to shrink into the shadows and disappear, but, also, to step forward. The human's voice carried across the docking bay, low but firm, and somehow it cut through the network's telepathic noise. "I'm looking for someone who's not like the others," he said. His tone wasn't mocking, wasn't patronizing. It held promise, possibility. Lyra's breath caught. Could he mean her? The crowd of aliens flowed around her like a river, waves of thought brushing against her, unheeded. Panic bubbled beneath her calm facade. Her species viewed outsiders with suspicion, especially humans, whose unpredictability had been documented as dangerous, even reckless. Yet here he was, standing there calmly, unafraid, as if her isolation was not a flaw to be corrected, but a truth to be acknowledged. Lyra wanted to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. She wanted to move, but her feet were frozen on the cold metal floor. And yet, something inside her stirred, a fragile thread of hope, weaving through years of loneliness. For the first time in her life, she felt seen. Jackson, the human, tilted his head slightly and smiled, not a wide grin, not a show of teeth, but a simple acknowledgement that said, "I notice you, you exist." That single gesture, so ordinary for humans, carried weight she had never experienced. She swallowed hard, her pulse echoing in her ears, and for the first time, the station, the hive, the network, the sea of indifference did not feel quite so suffocating. Somewhere deep inside, a spark ignited, and with it, a quiet but relentless sense that this human could change everything. The docking bay was alive with the hum of the station, yet to Lyra, it sounded like thunder in an empty cavern. Her pulse drummed against her ribs as she lingered near the edge, watching Jackson move with an effortless confidence. Every step he took seemed intentional, measured not like the aliens who drifted as extensions of the collective mind. but as if each movement carried purpose. He stopped a few meters from her, arms relaxed at his sides. His eyes scanned the throng of aliens around him, but then, almost imperceptibly, they found hers again. Lyra felt a jolt, as if a bolt of electricity had passed from his gaze into her chest. Her first instinct was to retreat, to melt back into the crowd, where no one would notice, but something about the human made her hesitate. "Hey," he said, voice calm, but cutting through the mental static that surrounded them. "I'm Jackson. Are you alone?" The question, simple as it was, reverberated through her. Alone, yes. She was always alone. And yet, the way he asked it felt different. No judgment, no expectation, just acknowledgement. Her species would have never bothered asking. They would have assumed she had no place, no purpose. Lyra's legs shook slightly. She wanted to turn and flee, to hide behind the synchronized throngs, but curiosity rooted her to the spot. She met his gaze, and for the first time, she didn't feel invisible. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly, the words barely audible over the hum of alien conversation. Jackson smiled faintly, tilting his head. "Maybe, but here I am. Maybe I'm here for a reason." Lyra's breath caught. The human didn't seem scared, didn't seem confused by the network's invisible currents that swirled around them like ghostly threads. He didn't flinch. In fact, he seemed to see her in a way no one else could. The silence stretched, thick with tension, as if the very air waited for her to react. A sudden shift rippled through the station, a low vibration that made metal groan. The network pulsed unevenly, and a sharp sensation shot through her head, a warning she hadn't felt before. Something was off. Jackson noticed it too. He stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. "We need to move," he said quietly, almost conspiratorially. "Something's wrong here." Lyra's eyes darted to the crowd. The aliens swirled around them, oblivious, their collective mind blissfully unaware. But she knew better. She had learned to sense the subtle disruptions, the hidden undercurrents that threatened the fragile order. Panic bubbled beneath her calm exterior. The station had rules, strict rules. Deviations weren't tolerated. And yet, the human didn't seem alarmed. He seemed ready. "Why? Why do you care?" she asked, her voice trembling. "No one notices. No one cares if I exist or not." Jackson's eyes softened. "Because I do. And maybe someone should." His words hit her harder than she expected. The simplicity of them, the absence of pretense or expectation, made her chest tighten. For years, she had survived in shadows, unnoticed and unremarkable. Now, a human one of the unpredictable. Chaotic species she had been taught to avoid was telling her she mattered. Before she could respond, the station shuddered again, a violent tremor that rattled the floor beneath their feet. Red warning lights flashed across the docking bay. Aliens around them stiffened, their synchronized movements stuttering, fragmented. A low, ominous hum began to pulse through the station's hull. Jackson grabbed her arm gently. "Come with me," he urged. Now, Lyra hesitated. Fear clawed at her, warning her of the consequences of leaving her assigned path. But the pull of his gaze, the certainty in his movement, was stronger. She nodded, almost imperceptibly, and followed him into the shadows of the docking bay. As they slipped through narrow corridors, the station seemed to close in around them. Sparks danced along exposed panels, and shadows twisted unnaturally against the walls. Every step was suspenseful, every sound amplified. Lyra's chest burned with adrenaline, but also something else, hope. For the first time, she was no longer just alone. Someone had seen her dot, and that small, fragile spark of recognition might just be powerful enough to change everything. The corridors beneath the docking bay were narrow and unwelcoming, a tangled maze of pipes, conduits, and flickering panels. Shadows clung to the corners, and the hum of the station's engines thrummed like a warning pulse through the metal walls. Lyra's footsteps echoed lightly, betraying her anxiety. Every instinct screamed caution. Wandering here unbidden was risky, even for a station already in chaos. Jackson moved ahead of her, careful but unhurried, scanning the environment as though he could see both its dangers and its secrets at once. Lyra wanted to trust, him wanted to feel the strange warmth that had ignited when he first looked at her, but the station was unforgiving. One wrong move, and the security drones are worse. The telepathic overseers would notice. "Wait," she whispered, stopping him. Her eyes flicked to a grated doorway, partially hidden behind a tangle of pipes. Behind it, faint green light pulsed. She hadn't shown this area to anyone in years, not even her closest colleagues. "There's something you need to see." Jackson tilted his head, curiosity evident in the soft crease of his brow. "Something you've been hiding?" Lyra swallowed. "Yes, but it's private." The narrow doorway opened into a room so unlike the rest of the station that Jackson froze for a heartbeat. Bioluminescent plants clustered in corners and along the walls, their tendrils curling in intricate patterns. Mist hovered above the metallic floor, catching the soft green glow like a living fog. The air smelled faintly sweet, almost alien, a sharp contrast to the sterile, metallic temps of the station above. Lyra's chest tightened as she stepped further in. "They don't see this. They never notice," she murmured. "They think it's insignificant." Jackson crouched, reaching out to touch a leaf that shimmered with subtle light. "It's beautiful," he said. His voice held awe, untainted by condescension. "I've never seen anything like this." Her heart raced not from the beauty of the room, but because someone had noticed her secret. Someone had seen her. It was thrilling and terrifying all at once. A sudden jolt ran through the station, and the walls shivered as if the entire structure was alive and in pain. Red lights flashed through the misty room, and the hum of the network above grew irregular, fractured. Lyra froze, instincts screaming danger. "Something's wrong." "It's them," she whispered. Jackson stood quickly, scanning the room and the corridor behind them. "The faction. They punish anyone who doesn't conform. Anyone who stands out," she said, voice low and trembling. "If they find us here." He nodded, eyes sharp. "Then we make sure they don't." Lyra's pulse raced. Her species had been trained to fear deviation. Every step outside conformity was a risk, but with Jackson, the fear transformed into something else, determination. Together, they began to move deeper into the room, weaving between plants and mist, searching for a safer path. Shadows danced along the walls, exaggerated and threatening, turning the garden into a maze of suspense. Every footstep, every breath, felt amplified in the tension of the moment. Jackson paused near a small alcove where a cluster of glowing plants seemed almost to react to his presence. "Do you come here often?" he asked quietly. Lyra hesitated. "Never with anyone else. It's mine, and it's the only place I feel real." The words hung between them like fragile glass, shimmering but vulnerable. Jackson's gaze softened. "Then I won't break it. I want to see it. I want to see you." A tremor shook the room. Dust and pollen swirled in the green light. Something or someone was coming. The station's network pulsed violently, and distant shouts echoed from above. Lyra's fear surged, but she stayed still, gripping Jackson's arm. For the first time in her life, she wasn't alone in the chaos. And for the first time, the idea of being seen, truly seen, felt like a lifeline. A low, throbbing vibration ran through the station, rattling the metallic walls and sending ripples across the mist of the hidden garden. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest like a drumbeat, warning of imminent danger. Above them, the hum of the telepathic network fractured into chaotic pulses, sending shards of discomfort through her mind. Something or someone was tampering with the station's systems. Jackson's eyes scanned the room, muscles tense. "We need to move. Now," he said, voice tight. His hand brushed hers, a small anchor in the storm of fear that had begun to engulf her. Lyra nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. There, looking for me, she whispered, for anyone who doesn't fit. The station shuddered violently. Sparks rained from exposed conduits above, illuminating the misty garden in quick, jagged bursts of white. Shadows stretched unnaturally, twisting around the plants, making them look alive. Lyra's species had long known that nonconformity invited punishment. Now, the threat was close imminent. Jackson gestured for her to follow. "Do you trust me?" She hesitated for barely a heartbeat. Then, with a deep breath, she nodded. She had no choice. Alone, she would have been invisible and defenseless. With him, she felt dare. She admitted. Possible. They slipped through a narrow maintenance corridor. Metal walls slick with condensation, the air thick with tension. Above, the network's chaotic pulses flared in irregular bursts, a warning that the rogue faction had infiltrated the station's neural grid. Every step felt amplified, echoing off the walls in an ominous rhythm. "Stay close," Jackson whispered. "If they see you, it won't be good." Lyra's pulse raced. She had always feared exposure, always feared being noticed, standing out. Now, her greatest fear had arrived in full force, but with Jackson beside her. It was tempered by a strange courage she didn't yet understand. Ahead, a red warning light bathed the corridor in angry streaks. Figures emerged from the shadows, cloaked members of the rogue faction, moving swiftly and silently, their intentions unmistakable. Lyra froze. They were here for her. For anyone like her. Jackson stepped slightly in front of her, protective but not overbearing. His eyes flicked over their attackers, assessing, calculating. "We're not done yet," he said, low and firm. "Follow my lead." Lyra's breath caught. She had never faced confrontation like this. Her species' methods were subtle, controlled, but these humans relied on intuition, unpredictability, and quick thinking. And Jackson, he seemed to thrive in chaos. The first figure lunged, a blur of movement and telepathic interference meant to disorient. Jackson sidestepped smoothly, using the narrow corridor to his advantage, and shoved the attacker into the wall. Sparks flew where metal met armor, and Lyra's stomach twisted at the sight, but she did not flinch. She could feel Jackson's confidence radiating, steadying her, anchoring her in the storm. "Keep moving," he shouted over the growing cacophony. Lyra ran, adrenaline lending strength to limbs that had trembled minutes before. The mist of the garden seemed far away now, replaced by the stark, industrial labyrinth of the maintenance shafts. Every turn brought new shadows, new threats, but also new opportunity. A particularly close burst of energy arced from a conduit above, spraying light across the corridor. Lyra's body stiffened, but Jackson grabbed her hand, pulling her aside just in time. The heat passed, leaving her gasping, trembling but alive. For the first time, she realized that the threat wasn't just danger, it was acknowledgement. Her fear, her isolation, her difference, it mattered. And someone human was fighting beside her, treating her as valuable, visible, and alive. They paused for a brief second in a dim alcove, hearts hammering, breaths heavy. Jackson's eyes met hers. "You're not invisible," he said, voice calm amid chaos. "Not to me. Not anymore." Lyra's chest tightened. For all the danger, for all the uncertainty, one truth resonated in her bones. She had been seen, truly seen. And now, she would survive. The tunnels beneath the station twisted like the veins of some massive, metallic beast, narrow and oppressive, humming with energy that made Lyra's skin prickle. Sparks from exposed conduits cast erratic shadows across the walls, stretching and twisting like living things. Every step echoed unnaturally, each metallic clang amplified in the hollow corridors. She kept close to Jackson, his calm presence a tether in the storm of fear that coursed through her. "Stay alert," he murmured, scanning the passage with sharp, calculating eyes. "These tunnels are rigged both physically and mentally. The network above will try to find us. They'll sense your difference." Lyra's pulse spiked. Her difference had always been a curse, a constant source of isolation. Now, it was a beacon, marking her as prey. She swallowed hard, gripping the strap of her bag, every nerve on edge. Yet, despite the terror, there was a thrill, a dangerous, intoxicating thrill that she had never felt before. Ahead, a junction opened into a wider chamber. The walls pulsed with a faint, rhythmic glow. The station's neural network coursing visibly like molten veins through the metal. She reached out, fingers brushing the surface, and immediately felt a jolt, a tingle running from her palm to her elbow. This was the network's power, raw and overwhelming. Every alien in the station navigated it effortlessly. She had always felt disconnected, but Jackson, standing beside her, didn't seem fazed. "You can feel it, huh?" he whispered, crouching slightly. "It's wild, unpredictable." Lyra nodded, overwhelmed. "I've only ever sensed fragments," she admitted, "never the whole." Jackson tilted his head. "Then let's try something." Before she could protest, he reached out, guiding her hand along the glowing wall. "Trust me," he said. His voice was steady, grounding her. And, to her astonishment, the network responded not violently, not as a threat, but subtly, bending around them as though acknowledging their cautious intrusion. Lyra's eyes widened. She had never experienced this. Her species could navigate the network naturally, but it was always rigid, controlling. Jackson approached it differently through observation, intuition, and patience. She realized he wasn't just human. He was adaptable. He learned. He listened. A sudden tremor shook the tunnels, and sparks rained down, illuminating the shadows. Lyra flinched, heart hammering. Jackson grabbed her arm. "Move," he shouted, guiding her through a side passage. The rogue faction was near. She could feel the shift in the network, the subtle distortions they created like a predator circling unseen. The corridors narrowed, twisting into a near impenetrable labyrinth. Pipes dripped molten coolant, and the occasional burst of steam scalded the air with heat. Every turn was a gamble. Every shadow might conceal an enemy. Lyra realized the station itself had become a trap, designed to disorient and eliminate those who strayed. Jackson paused in a dim alcove. "We can't just run. We need to think, observe their patterns, anticipate them." Lyra studied him, amazed. Even in this chaos, he was calm, methodical, almost in sync with the threats around them. She mirrored his movements, letting his confidence seep into her, steadying her trembling limbs. For the first time, she realized that fear wasn't weakness. It could be a tool if controlled. Through narrow side passages, they moved like shadows, avoiding patrols, bypassing security nodes. Jackson occasionally whispered instructions, sometimes pausing to let her lead, valuing her instincts over his own. Each time he acknowledged her input, a spark of empowerment flared inside her, feeling foreign but intoxicating. Then, in a dimly lit chamber, they paused. The walls vibrated with the station's neural hum, the shadows stretching like claws. Lyra realized something terrifying. The rogue faction wasn't just hunting her, they were testing her, pushing her to her limits. But now, with Jackson, she felt ready. She was no longer the unseen, isolated alien. She had a partner. She had a purpose, and for the first time fear became fuel. The chamber was silent at first, but the silence felt alive, pressing against Lyra's chest like a physical weight. Her pulse rattled in her ears, echoing louder than the hum of the station itself. She had always feared isolation, but now it came in a tangible, suffocating form: captivity. The rogue faction's members had appeared from the shadows with uncanny precision. their movements coordinated and merciless. One moment she was running, the next she was suspended in a stasis field, light bending around her body in ribbons of pale green that burned against her vision. Lyra struggled against the invisible bonds, but the field responded to every twitch, every push, tightening with precision. Panic clawed at her chest. Her species had long been trained to obey, to blend in, to vanish, rather than provoke. Yet no amount of training could have prepared her for the helplessness of this moment. Above her, Jackson's voice cut through the oppressive silence, sharp and steady. "Hold on. I've got you." She could see him moving along the edge of the chamber, his figure illuminated by the pulsing light of the network. Sparks arced from exposed conduits, throwing the room into staccato bursts of brightness and shadow. Each flash revealed the cold, angular forms of the rogue faction surrounding her, their eyes and minds focused with intent. Jackson's approach was methodical. He assessed the field, noting the points of stress and the patterns in the pulsing light. Then, with careful precision, he activated a small device from his pack. The stasis field flickered, wavered, and for a heartbeat, Lyra felt a rush of hope. But the rogue faction was quick. One of them lunged toward him, telepathic interference rippling in the air, meant to disorient and crush his resolve. Jackson ducked, narrowly avoiding a strike, and countered with a sharp burst of energy from his device. The stasis field around Lyra flickered again, and she shivered as the green ribbons of light loosened ever so slightly. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, drawing strength from the human below. Every instinct screamed to panic, to give up, but the thought of him, unwavering and determined, anchored her fear. Jackson moved closer, using the environment to his advantage. He kicked a loose panel, sending sparks flying and shadows dancing wildly across the chamber. The rogue faction faltered for a split second, just long enough. With a calculated burst from his device, the stasis field shattered, sending ribbons of green light snapping back into the walls like elastic. Lyra dropped to the floor, gasping, free but trembling. She scrambled toward him, fear and relief colliding in a chaotic surge. Jackson grabbed her hand, holding it tight. "Are you okay?" he asked, voice calm, controlled, almost impossibly so amid the chaos. Lyra nodded, though her legs felt like lead. For the first time in her life, she realized that someone human had seen her struggle and had acted, not with judgment, not with indifference, but with recognition, respect, and courage. Around them, the rogue faction hesitated, unsure, disrupted by Jackson's unpredictable tactics. Lyra's gaze swept over the chamber, noticing details she had never dared to observe before. The way shadows fell, the subtle vibrations in the walls, the thin fissures in the network's pulse. Knowledge that had been useless before now became power because she was seen, guided, and valued, and in that moment, suspended between fear and freedom. Lyra understood something she had never truly believed. Being seen was not just validation, it was survival. Jackson offered his hand again, this time for her to rise fully. She took it, and as their fingers intertwined, a flicker of understanding passed between them. The danger wasn't over, but for the first time, she wasn't facing it alone, and the spark that had begun with a single gaze now blazed into something unstoppable. The central hub of the station was a cathedral of metal and light, vast and echoing, its walls pulsing with the neural network like the heartbeat of a living organism. Red alarms bathed everything in staccato flashes, casting jagged shadows across the thousands of aliens who now moved in confused, fractured patterns. The rogue faction had taken control of parts of the network, twisting its flow to instill panic and enforce submission. Lyra and Jackson crouched behind a support strut, surveying the chaos. Sparks rained from exposed panels, and the floor vibrated with every pulse of the network. Above them, a swarm of drones hummed, scanning for anomalies. Every second they waited increased the risk of detection. "We can't just hide," Jackson whispered, voice tight. We need to show everyone that you're not expendable. Lyra's heart raced. She had always believed that visibility meant danger, that standing out would always invite punishment. But now, with Jackson beside her, fear transformed into strategy. She had learned to read the network's subtle distortions, to anticipate the rogue faction's moves. Together, they were a force the station had not counted on. A sudden flash of light revealed a patrol of rogue enforcers, moving directly toward them. Lyra tensed, ready to duck and flee, but Jackson grabbed her arm. "Now," he hissed. Lyra focused, reaching out instinctively to the network through the faint threads she could sense. She guided a subtle disruption, a tiny pulse that confused the rogue enforcers' perception. They staggered, swayed, their coordinated movements breaking just long enough for Jackson to strike with calculated precision. One by one, the enforcers were disabled, not killed, but incapacitated, demonstrating control without chaos. The central hub pulsed erratically as the rogue faction realized their grip was slipping. Lyra felt it through the network, their frustration, their attempts to isolate her again. But this time, she was ready. She moved through the pulses, with Jackson beside her, each step deliberate, each motion a counter to the faction's manipulation. Shadows of panic stretched across the hub, but Lyra and Jackson were calm, methodical, unstoppable. Then the leader of the rogue faction emerged, cloaked in a shimmer of neural interference, his presence commanding and terrifying. He reached out mentally, trying to overwhelm Lyra, to force compliance through fear. But she had learned to resist, to channel her fear into focus. She met his mental surge, not with panic, but with controlled defiance. Jackson mirrored her movements, predicting the leader's attacks and countering them with ingenuity, turning the network's energy against the rogue faction. Sparks arced from the walls as the neural pulses warped and twisted, shadows writhing across the hub. The faction's patrols faltered, then collapsed entirely. The central hub's lights shifted from red to a steady white, and the network hummed in restored balance, acknowledging Lyra not as an anomaly, but as an equal participant. Lyra's peers, who had watched from the sidelines, began to notice her presence in a way they never had before. The subtle gestures she had made in silence, the quiet defiance of her uniqueness, were finally visible. Whispers ran through the crowd of aliens' curiosity, recognition, and a flicker of admiration. For the first time, Lyra was not invisible. Jackson turned to her, eyes steady and warm amidst the aftermath of chaos. "See, you're not alone. Not ever again." Lyra exhaled, the weight of years of isolation lifting slightly. The rogue faction was neutralized, the network stabilized. But the true victory was intangible. Her existence, once ignored and marginalized, was finally acknowledged. She had survived the danger. Yes, but she had also survived being unseen. As the hub settled into quiet hums and the fractured aliens slowly returned to normal patterns, Lyra realized something fundamental. Courage was contagious, but recognition was revolutionary. One human had shown her that being visible, being valued, could change not just her fate, but the fate of everyone around her. And now, standing tall beside Jackson, she was ready for whatever came next. The observation deck stretched before Lyra, like a cathedral of glass and steel, suspended above the swirling expanse of the dying star. Nebula clouds twisted in brilliant hues of orange, violet, and green, casting fractured light across the metal walkways. The station hummed steadily beneath her feet, no longer chaotic, but alive in a calm, deliberate rhythm. Every alien in sight moved differently now, less rigid, less synchronized, yet more aware, more attentive. Lyra stood at the edge, her hands brushing the cool railing, feeling the vibrations of the station through the metal beneath her fingertips. Beside her, Jackson's presence was steady, grounding her as it had been through every shadowed corridor, every danger, every moment of terror. For the first time, She allowed herself to truly breathe around them. Other aliens passed, their gazes lingering briefly but meaningfully. Whispers flitted through the deck, subtle but unmistakable. They noticed her uniqueness, her courage, the small defiance she had carried silently for so long. She realized she was no longer invisible, no longer an anomaly to be ignored or punished. She was seen. Jackson leaned slightly closer. "Look at them," he said, voice quiet but certain. "They're noticing. You made them notice?" Lyra's chest tightened with a mix of awe and disbelief. For years, she had navigated life like a shadow, slipping through gaps and avoiding attention. And now, standing here, framed by the dying star and nebula light, she felt the weight of recognition, not only from Jackson, but from an entire station that had been conditioned to suppress individuality. A sudden shimmer ran across the network beneath them, a residual pulse, a gentle acknowledgement that even the station itself seemed to recognize her presence. Lyra instinctively reached out, feeling the faint threads that had always eluded her. For the first time she felt a connection, not forced or controlled, but mutual. The network pulsed in harmony with her heartbeat. Jackson's hand brushed hers. "You don't have to be alone anymore," he said simply, eyes meeting hers. There was no expectation, no pressure, just truth. Lyra felt tears prick her eyes. Recognition, she realized, was more than survival. It was freedom. Being seen validated her existence, her choices, her individuality. It transformed fear into courage, invisibility into influence, isolation into belonging. Below, the station hummed steadily as the rogue faction lay neutralized, their threat dissipated. But the true transformation was not just in the station, it was in her, in the minds of those who had watched silently, in the ripple effect of acknowledgement that spread quietly but powerfully through the alien populace. The nebula outside twisted again, streaks of light dancing across the observation deck, like ribbons of color in slow motion. Lyra let her gaze sweep across the swirling expanse, then back to Jackson. "Thank you," she whispered, though the words felt almost too small for the weight of the moment. He smiled softly. "No, thank you for letting me see you." For the first time, Lyra felt fully present, fully alive, fully recognized. She understood that visibility was not weakness, it was strength. Courage wasn't just action, it was acknowledgement, and acknowledgement could ripple outward, changing not only lives but entire systems. She turned to face the station, her eyes sweeping the corridors and observation decks, seeing not chaos, but possibility. She had survived fear, she had resisted conformity, and she had been seen, truly seen, by someone who understood the value of individuality. As Jackson prepared to leave for the next mission, Lyra remained on the observation deck, her hands gripping the railing. The nebula reflected in her eyes, fiery and vibrant. She felt, finally, that she belonged, not because she had changed, but because she had been acknowledged, valued, and respected. And in that recognition, she discovered a truth that would guide her forever. Being seen is not just an act of attention, it is an act of transformation.